What's going on, guys? Jim Surratt, Stance Custom Support Systems, coming at you today. So last time we talked about what gear is and what it's made of and kind of a rundown on how it works, right? And we reviewed very briefly the three different types of gear: squat suit, bench shirt, and deadlift suit. And then I threw in, again, a shameless self-plug about wrist wraps and knee wraps. So today I want to spend a little more time talking about specifically like what squat suits are and how they work. So I have here with me, again, because we're talking about single-ply stuff. Now, single-ply and multi-ply operate in the same capacity or in the same way. Obviously, multi-ply gives you more support, more pop, which is the colloquial term for rebound out of the hole, than single-ply does. Multi-ply doesn't have to be as tight or by virtue of having multiple layers of support and material, as compared to single-ply, which only has the single layer, so it has to be tighter to be more compressive and more supportive, okay? We'll get into canvas versus poly down the road, but right now, again, we're gonna stay focused on single-ply poly squat suits. So this is a Titan Super Centurion, okay? So Titan kind of makes, I wouldn't say it's the best single-ply gear, but they definitely have the market cornered in single-ply gear. Now, what I mean by that is that in the USPA, so the United States Powerlifting Association, and the IPF, the International Powerlifting Federation, they don't allow multiply. Well, some USPA meets allow multiply, some don't, but for the most part, it's a raw, classic raw, or single-ply equipped federation, and the IPF only allows single-ply, right? So when it comes to international competition at the equipped level, Titan is where it's at. Now, especially with the IPF, you have to be approved, which basically means that you submit your gear to be, sorry, I gotta pick this up. You submit your gear to be reviewed, and you pay essentially a fee, upwards of, multiple tens of thousands of dollars from what I understand. And if your gear meets IPF specifications, it is therefore approved for use in competition. So it's kind of a barrier to entry for smaller companies that are trying to get their stuff out there, like myself. But again, we are not at the international level yet. We're not even at the domestic level yet. So we're getting there. But anyway, so Titan kind of has the market cornered when it comes to single-ply gear. Overkill makes really good single-ply gear. I have an Overkill shirt, which we'll talk about in a different video. Metal makes okay, not great, single-ply gear. And thereby F8 makes okay single-ply gear. I've used some of their single-ply gear, their equipment. It's not bad. Really, at the end of the day, unless the material is really subpar or inferior, it's not gonna make too much of a difference in my opinion. Like, I've used a single-ply F8 suit. It was just a stock squat / deadlift suit. And you can get away with having a squat suit and a deadlift suit, or you can get away with one suit serving dual roles as both a squat suit and a deadlift suit. But if you really want to become specialized, or if you really want to get particular with it, you do need different cuts and different construction, right? And we'll get into that later. Let's see, Inzer, not great for single ply. I don't even know if they make single ply. I mean, I know they do, but Inzer really, has their bread and butter in multi-ply gear. And let's see, so Titan, F8, Inzer, and Overkill, those are the big four. Right, so I would say out of those four, Titan, and then probably Overkill, and then F8, and then Inzer. Again, if you're looking at things from an international perspective, Titan definitely has the market cornered because they're IPF approved. And I don't think I know F8 isn't, I don't think Overkill is. So anyway, so you're kind of limited in your options. But anyway, so again, Titan single ply Super Centurion squat suit. Okay, so from what I understand of how it's constructed, it's pretty simple. It's like they've got this harness pattern here. And so what they've done, because single ply can only be one layer of material, right? It can only be one piece, it doesn't have to be a one-piece construction, but it can't be multiple layers of equipment, right? So if you look, you can see they've got this like X pattern or this diamond pattern harness system around the hips. So what they've done is they've cut the material into sections or into segments, and then they sew those segments together with a flat stitch or with a flat seam, and then some kind of stitching, like a zigzag stitch, that really binds the material up, it locks it in, and secures the thread in place so that the thread doesn't pop under extreme or super maximal loads, right? So I don't know whether the harness system, I mean, I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does make a difference. But again, this isn't a gear review, so we're not going to dive into that. But this is how Titan constructs their deadlift suit and their squat suit, at least their single-ply stuff. They have this harness system where they basically seam and stitch multiple panels. That's what I was looking for, panels together. So it's not just a single piece of fabric or two pieces of fabric sewn front to back. It's a bunch of different panels sewn together. Same with the straps, it looks like. So it looks like the straps they take and they overlay them across each other and they stitch them together, okay? So how does a squat suit work? Well, we talked about it a little bit last time, and the premise is pretty simple. Again, gear works on the process or under the concept of deformation and reformation, right? So when you wear a squat suit, okay, like I said, a single-ply squat suit is essentially just an overkilled, or I don't say overkilled. It's a overpowered singlet, right? So you step inside of it, put your legs through the pants or through the holes, and then you squeeze your way into it, you wiggle your way into it, and then the straps go up over your shoulders. And as you squat, so as you come down, so if this is a profile view, if my hips are here, right? As I squat and sit back into my squat position, into my eccentric loading phase, the suit binds up around your hips, your glutes, your thigh, like your quads and your hamstrings. And then because you have straps over your shoulders, the straps bind up as well and it creates resistance, right? So it provides support via resistance on the way down. And then you have the deformation, okay? Because again, poly is a the way that I define it is a pseudo-elastic material, meaning it deforms under significant load. But it's not elastic like a rubber band, right? It doesn't like stretch and snap back into place, right? It's very static, right? I can sit here and hold it. There's no tension on it, right? So it's a static material, but it is pseudo-elastic. It is dynamic to a degree, right? So as you squat, as you sit down, the straps load, okay? They go across your shoulders or across your traps. The straps load, create tension through the backside of the suit, through this harness system, through the glute panels, through the saddle here in the crotch. And then when you go to stand back up, because the gear wants to return to its natural shape, it helps propel you back up, right? So that's really a squat suit in a nutshell. Now, with a bench shirt, there's a lot of ways to manipulate how much tension and support and how much pop you get out of a shirt, right? So with a shirt, and we'll talk about this more in another video, but with a shirt, you can jack the collar. I mean, you can pull it down lower. The lower it is, the harder it is to touch, but the more support you get out of it, the more pop you get out of it, right? So you can handle bigger weights with a jack collar. With a squat suit, I've not really found many ways to like modify it. You could probably potentially like torque the legs a little bit or the pant sleeves if you wanted to. Meaning like, but you can't really because they're sewn together, right? By a saddle. It's not like they're independent like in jeans. But you might be able to like torque them a little bit. Now, when you start looking at custom gear, let's talk about that. When you look at custom gear versus stock sizing, custom is very different, right? Because you have the angle at which the pant sleeves come out from the suit, and then you have the angle at which they are rotated relative to the suit, right? So if they are flared out, it's going to accommodate a wider stance as compared to, I think when I bought this one, I was trying to squat a little bit narrower as compared to like my multiply stance. And so I selected like the narrow to moderate stance. I've moved away from that moderate stance and stepped back out into a wider stance. So, you know, I could probably benefit from getting a different suit. Not that this is not effective. Like, I mean, I've squatted 800 reverse band in this with wraps. So obviously the suit works. When you start looking at custom gear, that's when you can start really dialing stuff in, right? Like again, the angle at which the sleeve is attached to the body of the suit and what angle it comes out, and then what angle that seam is rotated, right? So if it's rotated, I think, let's think about this. If I rotate it backwards, that's gonna create additional torque on the hips and on the thighs, which will probably let you open up harder or force you to open up harder. Yeah, that makes sense, right? So if we look at this from a profile view, right? This is just my estimation. I'm not a gear designer, even though I'm trying to be. So I'm trying to figure this out as I talk. So again, if we look at where the sleeves, or where the pant sleeves are, down here, again, this is a narrow to a moderate stance squat suit, right? So if I wanted a wider stance, or a suit that would accommodate a wider stance, I would have had ordered something that had sleeves that come out at a greater angle, a more acute angle, right? Instead of this, right? Straight out to the side instead of straight down, right? And then if you rotate the sleeve around, it creates additional torque on that material and on that seam, so it allows you to open up your hips harder. It binds the material up more aggressively, provides more resistance, more stopping power, and then therefore more rebound it and pop out the hole. Okay? So outside of custom gear, there's not a whole lot of ways to modify a squat suit other than like structurally modifying it, right? What I mean by modify is like manipulate. That's the word I'm looking for, right? So like I said, in a bench shirt, you can twist the sleeves as you put it on. You can jack the collar down. You can pull the shoulder cover down. In a squat suit, without structurally or physically altering the suit, I don't know if there's a whole lot of ways or many ways to manipulate the tension that goes into the suit and then what you can get out of it, right? The carryover, right? I'm sure someone out there has done it. I just don't know how to do it, or haven't tried it yet because I haven't needed to. So what kind of squat suit should you buy, right? That's a good question. So single-ply is pretty forgiving all the way around. Now my overkill bench shirt is pretty unforgiving because it's an overkill shirt and it's built to my measurements as compared to being a stock size. So let's talk briefly about stock sizing versus custom sizing, right? So they're exactly what they sound like. So a stock sizing is like a size 44, right? Measured around your hips. That's usually the defining characteristic. And then each company has their own sizing guides. They're like, okay, if the hips are this big, then the quad's going to be a certain percentage of blah, 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 blah. The thigh opening is going to be a certain percentage. The torso is going to be so long, so wide around, that kind of stuff, right? And stock sizing is pretty good if you are just getting into gear or if you don't have the financial support for custom gear, right? The financial ability to buy custom gear, which is a little more expensive. It takes longer, obviously. But stock sizing can be difficult because if you're between sizes, you either have to size up and you don't get as much support out of your suit, or you have to size down and it's too tight to get on. Or what's worse, getting it on is usually pretty difficult, or it can be. Getting it off, that's the hard part, right? Especially when it comes to like canvas. A canvas squat suit, trying to get that off over briefs is miserable if it's not sized properly. I spent, I think, probably $250 on a Facebook Marketplace canvas squat suit from Inzer, the OG Leviathan. It took me about 20 minutes to get on over my briefs and couldn't hit anywhere near depth. And I was by myself, so, stupid me. Ended up having to cut the motherfucker off because my feet were going numb, legs were numb, everything was purple. Just couldn't get it down. And I had people help me, and they eventually left. They didn't want to do it anymore, which I don't blame them for. So I eventually just got a pair of scissors and went right down the middle of that suit, threw it away, right? So canvas is a very different game, very different animal. We'll talk more about that at another time. But yeah, so if you're just getting into single-ply gear or gear in general, right? If you want to jump straight into multiply, which is what I did. I went from raw lifting, like doing 5-3-1, never ran conjugate before, and then ended up at Missouri State training with some people or coaching or working under a coach who was a multiply world champion. And he got me into gear. I'd wanted to be in gear for a long time, but didn't know where to start, didn't know what to buy, didn't know how to use any of it, that kind of stuff. And so he helped me out, got me a lot of stuff, and I jumped straight into multiply. So been in multiply for many, many years, and then only recently have stepped away from multiply just because of available competitions in the area. Arizona is not a hotbed for multiply. And it's hard, it's difficult and dangerous to train super heavy multiply, especially squats, without a dedicated crew. And I have a great crew, don't get me wrong. But they're not people who have been around 1,000, 1,100 pound squats. So I'm not gonna, if I get hurt, it's one thing. If they get hurt, that's a very different story. And I'm not gonna hurt somebody for my own benefit, right? So anyway, so single ply, more forgiving for the most part. Most stock sizing is fairly true to sizing, meaning that like You know, if you take your measurements, you should be able to figure out where you land. And measuring is pretty simple. You just measure around your glutes, like around the widest part of your glutes, measure around your hips, and that usually gives you a pretty good idea of what size you'll be. My recommendation is if you're just getting into gear, go with Titan, because they have 3 different levels of fit, right? I think they have like normal fit, comp fit, and meet fit, like competition fit. And they get tighter as they go, right? So basically all it says is like, hey, if you're like regular fit, let's say I'm a 44, my regular fit would be 44. If I'm doing a competition fit, it'd be a 42. If I'm doing a meet fit, it might be a 40, right? So the tighter your gear, the more supportive it is, but also the more challenging it is to execute a lift successfully, hit depth, maintain control, manipulate the bar, manipulate the suit all at the same time, right? So let's see, what else should we talk about with squat suits? I'm sure something else will come to me after this, but pretty short and sweet video today. But again, squat suits, you wear them. So squat suits can be worn in competition with straps up. That's how you wear them in competition. That's your competition costume. That's what they call it if you are an equipped lifter. You can train in them straps down, right? So obviously if your straps are down, you just get the material binding around your hips, but you don't get the stretch and support out of the straps and out of the backside of the suit. So there's value in training with straps down if you are learning the suit or if you're trying to build power without additional assistance, right? So especially in multiply, so multiply kind of follows a pretty traditional pattern when it comes to meet prep, right? So like multiply, you wear briefs, you can wear briefs, and then you can wear a squat suit on top of that, right? So the typical pattern is briefs for X amount of time, briefs plus suit, straps down, add wraps, and then briefs plus suit, straps up, and then eventually add wraps so you're in full kit. That's what that's called. Single ply is a little bit different. Okay, you can still follow a similar pattern, but in single ply, you can't wear single ply briefs under a single ply suit. Maybe in 1 or 2 federations you can, but in like the USPA, you have to wear just a single suit. You cannot wear briefs and then a suit over top of those briefs. So when it comes to programming for single ply suits, my recommendation would be single ply or straps down, sleeves for X amount of time, add wraps. So you're adding one element at a time, one layer of complexity, one variable at a time, right? You're not changing all the variables at the same time and seeing what happens. You are progressively overloading your assistance. So straps down plus wraps, straps up plus wraps. So a little more streamlined, a little more simplistic than multiply. So the ease of entry when it comes to single ply is much greater. So it's much easier field to step into than multiply, because one, for the average single ply lifter, you're not handling like the 1,000-pound plus range that you are in multiply, that you can in multiply, and so you don't need as many people. You don't need as much education when it comes to a crew, right? Like what I mean by that is spotting, right? Like if I don't have a crew of people around me who know how to spot and how to catch 1,000 pounds, I'm not going to take 1,000 pounds, right? Somebody's going to get hurt, and it's either me or them. And again, if I get hurt, that's one thing. If they get hurt, that's a very different story. So single ply is a little bit easier to get into, both literally and figuratively. It's not as tight, or it's actually probably tighter, but it's less restrictive because there's not as many layers, right? It's not as stifling, right? It doesn't feel like a diaper.